Okay, so this has actually changed a little bit considering Emre could not be here. So instead of us yelling at each other, it's actually just going to be me yelling at myself for an hour. If anyone wants to step up, you're more than welcome to. So we created a card game. Well, we called it a card game. We didn't actually have any physical cards, which only got a name when we decided to create this panel. And it's Cards Against Privilege because for some reason, we got into an argument. He said something, and I'm like, what? I'm a woman, so you get to say that to me? And it kind of pulled him up. And then from there, this diversity card game came into being. And it's a way for us to discuss issues and like microaggressions that we have to deal with and like being able to vent about those, as well as pointing out behaviors that the other might have in such a manner that it's not defensive. And it kind of like relates to the scarf model. So because I don't have Emre here, this is going to be really weird, and I'm going to start sourcing panelists from out of you. So if anyone has a point to bring up or a question to ask, just jump in. If you do interrupt me and you're a guy, though, I will play the woman card and be like, don't get to do that. Also, publishers. Okay, I'm going to put this on airplane mode because I'm also volunteer coordinator, so I keep getting all the messages. Woo! All right, so we did a little bit of research for this, looking into humour and how it's used and like just general research into humour, really. So I'm going to start with a couple of my cards. I'm a woman in a very male-dominated industry. I think last time there was an industry survey, it was 10.45% of full-time people are women, which means it's still pretty heavily guy. Luckily, with part-timers, it's about, I think, 36% women, so it does go up a little bit. So an interesting thing I found, there's four kind of, according to a study, and I will put all these links up somewhere at some point, there are four types of personal humour. There's affiliative, which is non-hostile, tolerant use that affirms self and others, and presumably it also enhances interpersonal cohesiveness and attraction, which I think is just general, likability as opposed to sexual. There's self-enhancing, which is you maintain a humorous perspective even in the face of stress and adversity. Closely allied to coping humour, relates to perspective-taking humour, or it's also used as an emotion regulation coping mechanism, allows the avoidance of negative emotions while maintaining realistic perspective. And that's really heavily used for interpersonal relationships. There's aggressive humour, which relates to sarcasm, teasing, derision. It's often used to manipulate others by implied threat of ridicule. And then there's also self-defeating humour, which is self-disparaging. You amuse others at one's own expense as a mean of ingratiating, and the last two are seen as slightly negative. And so this is not really going to have a flow. We're looking at Cards Against Humanity as well, because what makes ours just different to Cards Against Humanity, and despite the similarities of having cards and like having really, often we'll make jokes at ourselves, that self-deprecating kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'm Japanese, I must be graceful. That explains why I fell over the other day and keep falling off my bike and stuff like that. But it's that aspect of who makes jokes at themselves, at their own gender, at their own race and things like that. Because, yeah, I know, like, I'm half Japanese. I make Japanese jokes all the time, sometimes very loudly in public, and then I have to usually yell out, "It's okay, I'm Japanese," just to make it better. Because I don't want people to think I'm racist, because it's often at my mum or my family and behaviours like that. Recently, I had someone tell me that the Japanese people, she just loves Japan so much. The Japanese people are just so graceful. And I just was like, can't deal with this, because she's a white girl. She's got that fetishization of Asian culture. Anyway, I was talking about cards, wasn't I, that I was playing? Yeah, I'm going to start taking notes. Anyone else want to hold me accountable? So, cards. Yeah, another one is I am half Japanese. I look very white. I pass very white. And that actually leads to a lot of conflict of guilt of, I've got this other culture, how much can I speak of it? I was raised in Australia since I was a child. I have lived in Japan for like a month at a time for most of each year while I was growing up, and I'm not graceful, so I am going to knock that over at some point. What else? there are things that I didn't realize I have that aren't privileges, like the fact that I had to drop out of uni because I couldn't afford to send myself there. And that's a privilege so many people have that I didn't. What else do I have? Does anyone else want to call out any cards that they might have? That's actually a privilege that I get the chance and the opportunity to do that without it affecting my work. So I can express myself in a really creative way. But yeah, like acknowledging that I can do that and someone else can't is really important. And bleach takes to my hair really easily. Also, I have the privilege of shaving off my head this Sunday, total plugging, my head shaving thing. If you're going to be at Megadev, it's going to be done there. You can donate there as well. We'll have an independent party counting all the cash that they get there. Where else? Yeah.
Sane appearing privilege, as in not being psychotic or
yeah.
Psychotic or...
Actually, I was talking about that earlier with someone when I mentioned I was doing this panel by myself, and I said something about, oh, blah, blah, being crazy. And then I'm like, well, that's actually ableist language, and I need to be called out on that. So there are so many things that I may not realize I have until someone calls me out, and I can't change my behavior until someone does. And that's really important. So yeah, this humor is being used as an education tool because it does create a safe space where I can call out Emery or someone can call me out. And my first reaction isn't to get defensive because it's in that circle of play. And there are times when I'll say something, Emery will be like, look, English is my second language. That's something I didn't know about him. And I was like, oh, crap, I can't actually respond to this. You have had to learn a completely new language at the age of 12. I've never had to do that. All I've done is start forgetting Japanese. That's also ties back into the Japanese guilt card, so yay! All right, so I was talking about cards. I've talked about those things. Oh, and we got onto Cards Against Humanity. Cool. So who here plays Cards Against Humanity? Who here enjoys Cards Against Humanity still? All right. I played a couple of times and then realized I didn't enjoy it. And I was reading a couple of articles about this, and someone said, if I wouldn't play a card because my black friend's there, why will I play it when my white friends are there? And when I play and I play a card, everyone plays all the Asian ones. And it's funny because they're my friends, and they're within a certain circle of people who are allowed to make jokes about me being Asian because they hear me doing that. And then it just kind of travels out, and it just feels mean, and it feels like there are a lot of tropes, and we're not laughing at, we're punching down with Cards Against Humanity, we're not punching up. And we shouldn't be using humour to punch down if we want to help people. And it feels like we have a huge amount of privilege to be able to sit around and make these jokes about things that are often microaggressions that are dealt with daily with people who don't have these privileges. It's like, if someone doesn't know me very well and plays an Asian card against me, they could be the person on the street who's saying something about how there's we're getting swarmed by Asians and stuff like that. It's like, well, what are you saying about me? What are you saying about my mum? And it just makes me really uncomfortable. And I played it 2 or 3 times, and I was just like, this isn't for me. And there's also the side of it that's really crude and stuff, and that's not my thing, but that's a personal thing. And ow, this is actually really annoying on my neck. There are some really interesting articles on Cards Against Humanity. I don't mind people playing it, I just want them to be aware of the power dynamic there. And also things like the rape cards. Someone in your group's been raped, the chance of someone who's been raped is stupidly high. Why would you risk bringing up all these upsetting memories? It just doesn't seem really cool to me. Yep.
So one of the things that I do, because I've got a gigantic Cards Against Humanity collection, and while I was over in Ohio recently for a friend's wedding, we had a bachelor party.
Yeah.
And I had toured it there. But before I went to it, the thing I actually had done was I'd gone through and I basically do it every year whenever Cards Against Humanity is basically an annual thing, once a year.
Yeah.
Every single time beforehand, I'll go through and I'll remove all the super offensive cards, so it's just left with stuff that's meant to be well thought, or is, after having so many cards, is a bunch of blank ones.
Yeah.
And so most of the really funny cards that we had in there are all in-jokes.
Yeah.
And so one of the funniest cards we ended up playing during the bachelor party was actually a jab at ourselves. Because groom played World of Warcraft with us. And so he had that was the, when I become president, I'm going to have to erase all evidence of my involvement with blank. And the custom card that actually got played by one of the players in the room was the guild that we used to play in World of Warcraft. And everybody lost it.
Yeah.
And it's like, when it's stuff like that.
Yeah, there's no punching down on that. Yeah.
Haven't they also removed the rape cards?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Australian.
Yeah, Australian doesn't have it.
Oh, awesome.
They
Yeah.
actually made it from the US edition before that, but they've been trying very hard to actually make up for the...
Yeah, they do a lot of good deeds as well. And it's that whole interesting thing. I actually did a talk at GX about liking really problematic media, like liking Game of Thrones, and the representation of women in Game of Thrones is really terrible, but it's a great show and I love watching it. Although I haven't seen the latest season, so no spoilers. Yeah, I don't have time for TV. Yeah, like I've heard a lot of people have modified Cards Against Humanity so they're comfortable playing it. And like, I think that's a really good idea because it is, games are evolving, games are growing, and why not have in jokes and stuff like that?
It is very, very problematic. You have like the base game and you play with a group of strangers, and that's when it gets really like it's bad.
Yeah.
It's also a diminishing return because
Yeah.
looked over and calling out my bullshit.
Do you have any cards to play? Like this is.
I have a big one.
Yeah.
I've been working for a guy's council, and so people ask me about my genitalia on a daily basis.
Yeah, fun, huh?
It's like, and I do that by asking, so how far are you going to go? That's the question, and that's what they actually want to know. It's what's in your hands.
Yeah.
But I'm slightly shaking now.
Do you want a hug?
But it's a diminishing return playing classic man, and I got a huge share. I played it for a bit, and I enjoy it. But every time you play it, the card has less impact.
Yeah.
There's less money the next time around. I think that's a fundamental problem with that game.
Yeah. It's like the shock value doesn't last past the shocking initial reaction. Did you want some glitter?
I'll come and get covered.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah, every time, because I seem to have become the glitter fairy, totally accidentally. I'm a victim in this whole thing. Yeah, people are forcing me to cover them in glitter and sending me glitter, and life is just hard and terrible. So Tony Reid, who organises this wonderful conference and does a lot of great things and, you know, helps fight for games with the government and all the rest, is kind of like a little not so keen on glitter. And my response to that is to play it's diversity in games. Don't stifle diversity. Because we don't all want to think the same, do we? Also, if you don't want glitter, I will take a no very easily because it's a consensual thing. It's like hugs. It's like Cards Against Humanity. Why push boundaries and why force people into situations that make them uncomfortable? And yeah, I like glitter.
Mind you, walking around yesterday with glitter in my beard was pretty good conversation starter.
I know. Yeah, it made me really happy because people would come and like, everyone's like, oh, so you got Kamina, and I'm like, but yeah, it's like, I think I started towards the end of the night being like, okay, you're this color, go find people of the same color as you. And then accidentally created tribes of like glitter people. And I felt really bad because I want everyone to be inclusive, not like suddenly separate. Although if you're going to fight over glitter colors, that's fine, I guess. Oh, I do have 3 colors today as well, and I will have 4 at the awards. So yeah, black, white, silver, and gold, because I figure that goes with everything. Doop, boop, 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 boop. Doop, boop, 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 boop. Yeah, actually, I was reading something about Lena Dunham, who tweeted something about, this athlete doesn't like me, he's not sexually attracted to me. And then I learned how bigger, blacker dicks as a card can actually tie into the sexualization and fetishization of black men by white women. And I was like, and it's great. I'm learning so much. I love learning. And don't know why I added that. But yeah, so... Oh, okay, so the next one is safe spaces and how this works with our card game. So Emery and I are both not whites. He is a dude. But yeah, this circle of play really creates a safe space for us to be able to talk about issues that affect us that maybe we wouldn't want to bring up. And it also means that we can talk about it in a way of like, who here's heard the phrase laugh so we don't cry? Yeah, it's... yeah, life, right? It's interesting. Yeah, like, who's got that joking banner where someone asks if you're okay and you're like, this stuff. But like, you laugh at the end of it and it's like, look, we're not making an issue right now. If I come to you in tears, I need you to look after me. But it's a really easy way of talking it. And I use humor for a lot of things. Like, I will talk about a lot of the stuff in my life, but I will not necessarily do it in a serious manner because I don't need it to be taken seriously and I don't like sympathy and pity. Yeah, and it's like sometimes I don't need that sympathy at the moment. I just need acknowledgement. Like, there's this shit thing that happened. I've got to ask Tony if I could swear. Let me joke about it, let me vent about it, and then let's move on because there's no point in getting upset, getting angry and stuff like that. And like, yeah, it does still happen. Like that woman who told me that the Japanese people are so graceful had actually started the conversation by telling me when I was having a rant about white people in Japan, that white people are allowed to act however they like in Japan. And I was like, no. You don't get to tell me. That's like Cards Against Humanity. Like, you can only play Sun cards in some ways and do not play that one right now. So yeah, it's kind of like, everyone knows microaggressions? No? I actually wrote down a definition somewhere that I really, really liked. And I'm really hoping I have it. It's kind of... Nope, did not write that down on these notes. That's helpful. Microaggressions are generally things that are said daily that aren't necessarily racist or sexist. It's just, personally, it's systemic. So yeah, like her pointing out that white people get to be white people in Japan is a microaggression. It's people telling me that I kind of look exotic is a microaggression. And just like daily things in the lives that we have where it's death by paper cuts. It's not the person screaming racist shit at my mum. It's the way that Census recently did a really great one. It's like, what nationality are you? What's your, origins? And it was Australian, everything else. I'm like, but I'm actually not majority Australian, whatever the fuck Australian is. I'm half Japanese, I'm a quarter Scottish, I'm a quarter Australian, I guess, because I don't know what the fuck that is. And that's also saying I'm white Australian. And it was like, so you want me out of the country? Do I belong here? Am I Australian at all, despite the fact, yeah, my passport says I'm Australian. My Japanese one says that my visa runs out in 2017, so can't have dual nationality, yay, because the Japanese are kind of terrible with other cultures sometimes. Yeah, it's like my cousin married a third-generation Korean guy, and my family was like, those Koreans. So yeah, that was interesting. My grandmother was great. She was like, yeah, but Keiko married a white man, so whatevs. she was a character. Anyone have any other microaggressions they want to talk about?
Yeah. The big one.
Yeah.
No matter what I'm wearing, heat. Or how I look.
Yeah.
I don't wear a lot of makeup or anything because I'm having my face being whipped by lasers.
Yeah, I've been seeing the posts. Ouch.
I did some poetry about it now. So, but even when it's obvious that it's not heat, it's still heat.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like,
I'm venting as well. Yeah.
oh yeah, no, totally. Play that card. Slam it down. Yeah. No, louder.
I've had some, I've had some subtle ones about my hair from usually presumably straight white males. You can, even if it's they say a complimenting thing, there's some tone to it that you can tell that like that's still a weird thing. Or even my favorite was when they'll make a joke to someone else about, oh, you should get hair like him. And you're like, well, you're saying that in a way that's like, oh, it's weird that you have just coloured hair. It's just coloured hair, get over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and these are like higher ups at the university I work with. So
Yeah.
it's like, that's right.
So it's okay for your work to let you have your hair like that?
Yeah.
Can you do your
Research.
job?
So
Yeah, too much bleach,
it's
right?
crazy, like, it gets in, and then you're like, oh, I can't do research anymore. Crazy.
Pretty much. It's just little cutting remarks that you can't do what you can do. Yeah.
So this is an example of both me and also a friend where we get the opposite thing. about, I'm trans, I'm non-binary, and no matter what, I will always get she, her pronouns.
Yeah.
Always, even when I ask otherwise. I mean, some people agree, obviously, but like just usually from older people who aren't in the games industry. And then my friend who is trans woman will get she, her pronouns, and then people will look at her feet and sort of do a little glance down, and then they'll swap to he in pronouns
Wow.
because she's got big feet, which is the most disgusting thing. Not actually the most disgusting thing, but
Well, yeah, see, humour. Like, we use hyperbole to, like, knock out the fact that there are some really terrible things. But yeah.
So like my boyfriend's white, and his dad has this great thing where I made him dumplings for dinner once, and he said to me, "Oh yeah, those are they're like it's like homemade Asian food. It's not authentic Asian food." And I know he's in mean.
Yeah,
It's
they never
He
mean.
doesn't mean it.
Yeah.
To be racist, but it does come across that he doesn't see me as being Chinese because I was born in New Zealand, don't speak Chinese, but it is Asian food.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And there was another one that was, oh, yeah.
Coming into the games community, I have this whole conversation about privilege and language particularly has opened my eyes heaps because I just live to say dude and man, and just because that's how I roll. And I'm slowly, because I like that slang is really a big part of who I am, but I'm trying to change that a little bit. So I've gone with mate. I say mate a lot, which is still a little bit gendered.
Yeah.
If you look at it, kind of. But I'm just I try to use slang that isn't gendered, but it's just really hard work. Just by the way that I was brought up, my family, holy, like the language.
Yeah.
The babies. So yeah, constantly being reminded is really good. But it's just every So it doesn't happen overnight, I guess.
Yeah, I do that. I say guys a lot.
Something that I've noticed was that growing up and having that same realization and that same personal growth and realizing that particular words mean things, even if we kind of socially conditioned them not to. But as I've kind of caught myself to stop saying particular things, I start noticing them in other people. And the more that you do that, and the more you call it out, people start noticing it as well, and they start doing the same. And like so many of my childhood friends who would say things like, "Oh, that's gay," and I'm like, "Oh, you say that like it's a bad thing," and then suddenly stop and they go, "Oh yeah,"
Yeah.
and then they do that in turn as well. So
It's because as a society, we still equate with feminine behaviour as being bad, as it said. So being gay is being seen literally in patriarchal terms and being a sign of weakness. And I've had to explain this to my nephew who is going on the very male part. I'm sure everyone in this room I just preach quite completely. But it's like that, there's no dialogue for that even now in a lot of mainstream Australia.
Yeah, we've actually, I don't use gendered insults if I can, because so many of them are the feminine terms. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to use them.
I'm sorry, just it's something I really value in coming into the games community that I'm in at least, is that I get to learn about this, and it's like the games community is pretty sweet for that.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, with what I've seen of it,
Yeah.
there's some ridiculous stuff going on.
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky coming into games. Like, I remember this was Microaggression when I was working at PAX East. PAX I was the second one. I was talking to my boss, and I was just like, everyone keeps asking me if I'm just here to show off the game. Of course I'm just here to show off the game. I'm a goddamn developer. But the real question was, are you a booth babe? And so I was just having this oh God, can they stop asking moment? And he was just tweeting out, tomorrow we've got 3 women on the booth. Between them, they've released 27 titles. They're amazing. They know their stuff. And it's having that support of this community has been great. And I really like the fact that often we'll call each other out in a really, in such a way that it's not, I'm going to do it publicly, I'm not going to berate you. It's hey, you did this thing, just want to let you know. Maybe for next time, don't do that. And I really appreciate that about this community. So yeah, totally call me out if I'm doing anything horrible.
I will say that as a mostly straight white man, that it is at times a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Because you're always I know I've slipped up on a couple of occasions with me when
Yeah.
I'll be talking, and just because I've been so used to using that one pronoun for such a long time, that to have to change it overnight is like, it's difficult. And I notice myself sleeping, it's like I instantly just feel horrible for it, because I'm totally aware of it, and I'm trying to change that. It's the same thing with like how you refer to people, right? Like I always used to say, hey guys, how you doing? I've been trying to change that to hey gang, because it's way better.
Yeah.
But that change is so hard to make, because it's just like
It's so ingrained and
it's so ingrained.
Yeah.
It's changing your habit.
it's systemic. It's everything.
Time.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I'm just like totally talking over you, but I've got the microphone, which is a privilege. So
Why so much?
actually, so there was like the whole we were going to the Sunshine Coast to mentor a game jam, and there were 3 of us from Melbourne who were flying up. It was Emery, myself, and Cam Rooney. And Cam is the straight white guy. He's got a lot of the privilege and all the rest. And so we were in the car, and he was like saying something, and like Emery and I were doing banter, and then he just he found his card. He found it, and he was so happy to play this. He slammed it down, and he's like, white guilt, white guilt, white guilt! And so that was the moment we were like, okay, yeah, we laughed and kind of broke. And we get changing your behavior is hard, and we don't want people to feel so bad that they feel defensive. And it was that funny moment, and we did just have that talk. But he said at the end that it was great because he learned all these things that he hadn't thought about because he's not exposed to them. And the fact that we could just joke for half an hour about every terrible thing that someone said about us, about race, for example, or gender examples that we'd seen and stuff like that. He's just I didn't know it was like this. And so, yeah, it was kind of really good. But when it got a bit overwhelming, he'd occasionally play white guilt. Or one day at dinner when he was like, why can't we just get along? And we just both, Emery and I both turned to him and oh, so now you're telling the minorities what to do as a white guy? And he's like, oh God, white guilt, white guilt. And yeah, it's kind of fascinating. As a group, we are stronger. And so being able to call each other out and then band together is really, I really liked it.
I feel like though that white guilt should be a good thing. In a way, you should never feel that you're being judged by minorities because you're slipping up, right? To make that change should be a positive thing, right? It should feel good to be making other people feel good and comfortable. Just because you're being put outside your comfort zone, having to change, doesn't need to be a negative thing.
No, I agree. It was just a fun card to play for him, I think. He was just so happy to have one card.
Card all the time.
Yeah.
I play a fat card.
Yeah, he knew when not to play it, which was usually when I was speaking. All right, anyone have anything else to add to that one?
I think the other thing too is acknowledging when people are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But just getting it wrong.
Yeah. I remember, so I called out Microsoft, the GDC dancer party, and all the rest, and got the apology. And I was being approached by journos after the apology had been released, and they're like, oh, so, Microsoft totally fucked up. I'm like, no, they apologized. Let's see how they go in the future. And they're like, yeah, but, you really hate them. I'm like, no, they apologized. Let's see how they go in the future. And it's people want to keep this fight going. And it's why can't we accept that people are trying to change, trying to learn? And everyone makes mistakes. Let's appreciate the effort that goes into trying not to make them. Yeah.
I think something that's happened to me quite a lot in my life is being in a space where it's kind of a bit of a boys' club, and guys saying, "Oh, that's gay," or saying "faggot," or time being a gay man, and that's something that now I've gotten to the point where I always pull someone up on it. There was a time where I was scared to, because I was oh, then I'm gonna differentiate myself. Not that I'm ashamed of, being gay or anything like that. It's just that kind of fear of making yourself different from everybody else. I don't know.
That actually relates to SCARF model, which was mentioned at the emotional intelligence panel, which I totally couldn't remember, despite the fact that Steph's boss has told me about 5 times about it. So when people are threatened in status, which is your relative importance to other people, certainty, which is your concerns with predicting the future, autonomy, sense of control of events, relatedness, sense of safety, and fairness, which is your perception of fair exchange between people. You kind of get really defensive. So it's like working out a way of doing that. And like, I'm with you, there are times when I just won't call out someone because I'm like, I don't know about this situation.
I don't do that anymore. I always
Yeah.
call people out now.
Nice. That's really good. Like, yeah, for me, sometimes like there are times when I'm like, I can't do this. I just don't have the bandwidth. And there are other times where I'll have like a huge half-hour conversation, come out going, oh, why did I do this? But it was like, turns out it was really good and stuff. And yeah, like I feel like I'm actually lucky. I've got the privilege to be able to call out people, so I should use that privilege to do so. Which I didn't actually think about at Microsoft, because then I was like, I'm fucking furious, and like went outside and I just keep swearing, and that's terrible. But yeah, like I was lucky I had a friend with me. If I'd been by myself, I would have been way more scared. I would have like not known, would have been less sure of myself. But I've got the privilege that I can call out this stuff, and if I can help someone else feel safer, more welcome, more included, then I'm going to do that. Yep.
Is that in the power of us who do have ridiculous amounts of privilege? Can we then leverage that power to,
Yes.
when you
Yes.
don't want to have to say
Yes.
Yes.
It's, yeah. This is actually something Emre was going to talk about, because he used to be a bouncer, which is very male dominated. It's very, you know, like it's got a lot of that kind of toxic masculinity idea to it. And so he uses his privilege in male spaces to call out bad behavior and change them from that way and start educating. And so, yeah, like men who are sexist aren't going to listen to women going, hey, dude, that's not cool. Use dude. But a guy going, hey, that's not cool, and actually like threatening their social status will actually get them to change their behavior. And maybe also like, and it's not even like you have to threaten their social status explicitly, but they may see like, oh, everyone's calling me out on this. I'm not going to be part of this group. I'm not going to be included if I keep doing this behavior. And hopefully they'll think about why that's happening. So yeah.
I've had discussions with friends about being a ninja SJW or a ninja feminist, because a lot of the time there are people that I have that are friends that will rant and rave about the latest, you know, oh God, I can't believe such and such said this about, you know anti-feminism things and such. And just being able to be able to stand up and say to them, you know, actually, it's more like this, and kind of give them some context, because they're obviously in an echo chamber of other dudes that are just like, you know, saying really, really negative crap. And they sometimes need to hear from somebody that, you know, isn't going to come across to them like just coming at them as a conversation, right? I think is really, really beneficial, because sometimes that's what they need. Whereas if you come at them super aggressive, like, just ends up making them shut down and they just ignore you and just, you know, you're immediately piled into that group and nothing ever changes, right? And so like the whole thing of being an ally, I think is basically that, right? Like you're already inside of those kinds of groups that do these really negative things, but you know better, right? And so you don't have to participate in those things. You have to pull them up when they do it and explain why they should. Yeah. I've been hearing that a lot at GCAP. This people that I've hang around with out here. It's like, you know, I can totally understand why you might feel this way, but this is why you should.
Yeah, I think like you're speaking of being an ally, it's like in those spaces that like I can't get into or someone else can't get into, if there's this negative behavior, you call it out. But in those spaces, you amplify it. Like in Twitter, instead of taking a woman's idea as your own and like going, I support this, why not just amplify her voice and like do that with everything? Yep. Oh, sorry.
It can be really frustrating sometimes as well, but it's like, do we really need, like, I would like to be able to kind of stand up and go, hey dude, that's a jerk move. And it's a little frustrating that a guy's voice is going to be more valid to a guy than my voice is. But you kind of have to pick your fights as well. Sometimes you just have to accept that, you know, whatever works. Like, yeah, sure, it sucks that his voice is more valid than mine, but if that's what's going to get the message across, then fine, so be it. Pick your battles. I'm not going to spend my entire life being angry at
Yeah.
It's his voice that's going to make your voice relevant.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a matter
that
of
sucks.
getting
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
It does.
sucks a lot.
Yeah.
It's the time to make that change,
Yeah.
right?
There's a thing that's happening that's actually taking place in the White House right now.
Mm.
So this is the US government.
Yeah.
This is the amplification thing, and
Yeah.
you've heard about this.
Yeah, that was you.
So what happens is they basically did the metrics. Someone actually ran the numbers on every time a woman made a suggestion versus every time a man made a suggestion, and what the reactions were, positive, and did they act on it, and versus negative and didn't act on it. And of course, the white male population consistently just had a higher ratio. It's not, you can't argue with it, it's just the numbers. The stuff that the white males said became policy, the stuff that the women said, or non-white people said just didn't. So what happens now is in meetings, what will happen, a woman will state a position or an idea, and all the women will find a way of repeating it in the meeting. So it actually gets amplified.
Yeah, and it was also to stop the men stealing the ideas as well. Because when they're like, oh, she had this great idea, it was this. Remember when she mentioned this? And the guys were like, oh, yeah, no, it wasn't my idea, I guess. So, yeah, that was great example. I loved reading that article. It was so good. But, yeah. Yep.
Well, an interesting example of something that I wouldn't mind getting some feedback from the group. My sister works in the medical field, right? And so she has a medical form, and it says, all the standard things that you need to fill out on the medical form, including your gender and stuff like that. And on this particular form, it only said male or female. And then she got a berating email from someone stating that it should, say other or something like else and this sort of thing. And she was didn't quite know how to sort of take it. She's like, well, because I need to know their sex in a way of diagnosing.
Sex is different to gender.
That's right. And I said, well, I think it's kind of, my sort of suggestion was you probably just like how people have a preferred name thing, like you might have your real name and then this is how you might want to be identified, that's maybe what they need to put on the form or something, but I was just interested to know what people...
This is probably something I can't answer, being very cis.
There are intersex people. There are 1 in 1,000 people have conditions that easily define them.
So they need to change the form to sort of identify it, to cover that.
Yeah, and one of my friends is having a fight because she identifies as one, but she was born intersex.
Yeah, even if you are just keeping it strictly, this is because we need your biological sex, it's still not male or female.
That's right, yeah. So.
Also, you have conditions that cause hormone problems.
Yeah.
So, for example, PCOS, which I have, which means even though I am biologically female, I have the hormone levels of a guy, or towards that, of a guy. It's horrible language. I need better language. Yeah, no, unless you've gotten a DNA test, which I think most people haven't, you don't actually know what your sex is. So I think the whole, I think that's a discussion to have with a doctor as opposed to something to fill out on the form. A doctor goes, what about your sexual health stuff? You need to talk about that.
1 in 1,000 people is a lot.
Same number as redheads.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a good point. Redheads get married.
Let's change the system. All right, let's see. Because we are totally not following the strict standard format that I had. I'm just okay, what's a good point to move on to the next? If anyone wants to join in, or I can just cover everyone in glitter for the next 20 minutes. Yeah.
Question. I don't totally understand the card game.
Okay. So.
And sort of how it creates that same sort.
It is something to play with people that you are comfortable with as well, so you're already vaguely in that safe space, but it's more about creating a discussion in a safe environment and in a joking manner that people don't get defensive and then sometimes aggressive about it. Because I think recently I said something like, oh, I'm feeling really pressured right now, and the guy went, I'm not pressuring you. I'm like, I didn't say that. I said I'm feeling. And so you getting really defensive is actually really difficult. And so it's a way for me to go, hey, Emery, you interrupted me. I'm a woman. And we don't actually have physical cards. But then I can talk about the fact that in a group of people, if women talk for 30% of the time, they're seen as dominating the conversation. And things like that. It's a lot easier if you can see it happen. Emery and I do tend to play it over Twitter as well, so if you follow both of us, at some point your feed is just going to be filled with Emery and I in all caps screaming at each other in a really ridiculous way, and I totally understand if you either unfollow me or mute me. We should probably put a graceful. We should probably put a hashtag so people can just mute the hashtag. It's a verbal game rather than a card game necessarily, even though we make the action of cards. And yeah, it would have been so much easier if he was able to do this panel, but he can't, so, you know. I figured I'd just kind of boldly go where panels haven't gone in this room before.
Where can I buy a copy?
Actually, we were thinking of like having everyone make up cards and like participating in the game today. And then like we all turn up with it.
That's actually partly what got me thinking about this, is like, what will be my takeaway and how do I learn to apply this, or how do I, like,
Yeah.
I mean, is it, for example, when if I call someone else out on their behaviour, is it a useful tool to help discuss that, or like, how can I propagate this?
Yeah, so we were like talking about using humour, and like you look at the different types of humour that people use in a way to call them out and like make it, and how to start these conversations with other people, and acknowledging your privilege as well. Like, yeah, like this talk is completely different now from what we were going to talk about. I think I've got the takeaways written here. I've also got a lot of research written here, so doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. I think we mentioned toxic masculinity. Where we did put takeaways in somewhere. Nope, turns out I write a lot of scratch notes when I shouldn't. So takeaways, we have a deeper understanding of diversity issues and the language surrounding it, and how to create a safer space for these discussions and translate these into real life settings. And also the gamification of power dynamics by taking stereotypes, tropes of games and applying them to the world. Now, Emery is much more the game designer than I am, so he could probably talk a lot better about the gamification. I'd probably give him a week to, like, he's got a lot on this week. So, like, give it a week before you ask him any questions about gamification of diversity.
Well, one thing I thought if there were physical cards would be nice, like, I don't know what I don't know. So I've heard, you know, the language of using the word crazy is not a great thing. I've heard it multiple times, but instantly I forget. And probably between the last time I heard it, I've probably done it. So if there was a physical, I mean, the stack would be probably massive.
Yeah.
But like, if there was a physical version, you could, actually, I could see, oh, okay, I do that sometimes, that's horrible. And then also for some of the more common ones, being able to go, okay, don't, on the other side being like, I use the word guys a lot. Actually, team pal, buddy, friend, all of those can be used instead.
Yeah.
Immortals, things like that.
Yeah. Like, we actually joked about, like, you don't get a huge stack of cards, you only get your expansion pack that's just tailored to you. But it is a great way of, like, something happens and you just kind of, like, do the card gesture at someone. And, like, because it's Emery and he knows me, I'm just like, and then, like, if we're in a group setting, he's like, oh, wait. And he'll self-reflect then. Yeah, like, we both pretty much know what we've said once, like, you just review what you've said. So if I see you do anything like that, I'll just be like... I might even, like, write it on a piece of paper. But, yeah.
That by itself is kind of a nice kind of, you know, funny gesture to signal somebody, like, you just did something that you may not have picked up on.
Yeah.
That's just,
It's kind of like part of that calling out culture, and we're also calling in people as well. So it's like, we're all in this together. Let's make the world better. Yeah. All right, I'm going to keep going through my notes, unless anyone wants to say anything or bring up a topic or anything, please. Nope, we're all good. Also, I really hate Android. I started QA on Android. I hate Android. So yeah, part of the card game is it gives people that don't necessarily have an advantage in life an advantage in the game, because like the less advantage you have, the more cards you have to play, which is kind of like really interesting to be able to like suddenly going from nothing to everything. Well, somewhat. I still have a lot of privilege that I can't play. Playful discourse through ownership. So, yeah, like we also own our mistakes when we do something, and it does give us a lot of discussion points. Although Emery and I can argue about whether almond milk is actually milk or not, so. We're in a park as well at night. I don't know. We're just like yelling at each other. I think it's like a very safe way of yelling at each other and getting a lot of frustrations out. Yeah, when the microaggressions were happening with that woman, Emery was the person I was texting going, this person said this. And it's great to have those people around that you can discuss these microaggressions with. I had a conversation, I sent a photo of like the new and improved mountains team because everyone was out of the office and I had two women from New Zealand working and I'm like, look at the new and improved mountains team, yay! And then she's like, they still let guys make games? And I'm like, fake gamer boys, just doing it for the intention. And we just did that. And it was a really great way of like looking at the language that's used so often against us as women and just turning it back on guys and making a joke about it and changing that dynamic. And it was so good. Because who here doesn't use, like who here uses humour as a coping mechanism? Yeah. Cool. Yay.
Do you have the same manner as well?
No.
I have that constantly because it just turns, for those who haven't seen it, man who has it all, it turns the gendered language on its head. It's just, I can't even remember them by life every
Well,
time.
it basically just flips the genders, so it has like magazine covers of like, you can't have shaving cream and do these things at the same time. You know, Dad's big question today, can I have a job and a child? You know, how's about you treat yourself and you iron your wife's clothes before you go to work because you have that moment to yourself.
I did.
It's
really fun.
I'm not hung up on the term camera woman because I know it refers to both women and men. John, age 46. Male camera woman.
The term sportswomanship is completely gender neutral. Nothing else would carry the same weight. Kelly, sportswoman.
Is a man wearing a lab coat a sign of his promiscuity?
Does he have a shirt on? Yeah, no. Yeah, I've seen those pop up and I'm like, I should follow that, and then I just don't. But I didn't follow, like, I fucking love science for ages because it had the word fucking in it, so. Like, I'm kind of like, yeah. I don't actually swear on social media that much, unless I'm calling out giant corporations. My first tweet, which I didn't link to any of the others, is that I don't usually swear, bear with me, because my mum occasionally gets on Twitter and stalks me. And, like, trying to, like, it's really interesting because my mum's Japanese. She's been here for 35 years. My dad died when I was 18. My brother left home about 5 years after that. So she's been living by herself. And her grasp on the English language is actually becoming very interesting at times. She called me a shiny organic egg. My face, just my face, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Also, she really thinks I need a husband soon because I'm like getting way too old. And so I was like, well, why don't you have a husband? Like, why haven't you remarried? And she's like, oh, pain in the ass. And just wandered off. I'm like, so yeah, traditional Japanese mums are fun at times. But this means I can like have that whole Asian mums joke sometimes. Yeah.
Here's the question. Are there any ability cards?
We haven't actually gamified this properly. We need to.
I went to 2 talks on diversity.
Yeah.
One, I'm actually really annoyed at.
Oh.
I'll chat about that.
I will talk to you about that later.
The other one, this is very beautiful talk by someone who's becoming a dear friend of mine, and she actually talked about the guy who was the head of Xbox. And he's a guy that fell out of bed one day, and then 6 months later he found himself in a wheelchair with a slow degradation.
Yeah.
He refers to his disability as a design flaw. And of course, around everything else is a design flaw, like we'll live on it. So I think, so one thing I've noticed that's been kind of missing from all these diversity discussions is actually talking about abilities. And to give a further context of, something that affects our industry greatly, which we kind of pay lip service, but we don't acknowledge as mental. Like not just being stressed or being under pressure, but we have a lot of people who are very high intelligence community and have got a serious instance of mental illness.
Yeah.
I'm now finding myself in a immense privilege of employing 11 people.
Mm.
And it's something that I'm constantly concerned about, is everyone's
Yeah.
Show of hands, how many people don't feel stressed on a day-to-day basis as a game developer?
Hey, if you'd asked me like 2 months ago, I would have put my hand up. Actually, I was stressed because I wasn't stressed, and that was really stressing me out because last year I've had like 3 months on and then like 2 weeks off where I'm like, wait, what am I doing with myself? So I take on all these jobs and then I'm like, and it's been great. I realized being a little stressed makes me really chirpy in the mornings, which also gives me stress because I can't talk to my housemate, otherwise she'll kill me.
But the mental health thing is really interesting. I'm super glad that people are finally starting to talk about it. I've actually written a bunch of Gamification articles where I was kind of just opening up about what I've been through, because I was in high school, I got bullied a lot, and I ended up actually dropping. I never actually finished high school. And I was on antidepressants. I was on antidepressants for like 3 or 4 years. I stopped taking care of myself. And I just basically holed myself up in my bedroom and just played video games. And it was actually through playing video games that I started to rebuild confidence and eventually came back out again. So through that, like I've managed to build myself up again to being a producer and constantly being under pressure and just being able to handle it better. But at the same time, I'm surrounded by people that I'm like, I can see the stress, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, how can I help them deal with that the same way that I do? Because for me, to deal with that was 4 years inside my head. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not one of my cards, so I can't help you.
I was going to say, just kind of vibing off something you said that your struggle means that you're able to handle things a lot better now. And I think that people who've had different kinds of struggles turn into more interesting people. And like if you think back on high school, like those kind of beige bland people were the jocks and the plunder princesses or whatever this. And like when I kind of look around my social circle of friends, like everyone's had struggles. Everyone's really kind of fought to be where they are. And it's like, they're really interesting.
I think everyone has something interesting about them. It's finding them and also having them believe in it. I am a tiny potato. I will believe. I was going to say 10, yeah.
Just the way you handled that interaction was really interesting to me. He says that's not one of my cards.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through that a little bit?
If I have privilege in an area, I can't have a card, so I don't have necessarily a right to talk about it when other people who do have the card can. So when someone says, I have this card, that's their flaw, and I will not discuss, because I can't discuss it. Like, I've grown... Yeah, if it's not something I have experience with, then my voice doesn't need to be heard. It's my time to listen and to learn and help signal boost those and like create those spaces where someone feels comfortable to talk to me.
If there's no one else around to play their card, will you play their card for them?
I will not say that I have any experience in this situation. I will, but it's like men in male spaces saying, hey, don't use that gendered insult. This is why. They can play that card, but they're not going to say, you know, women, they can't talk about the everyday experiences of women necessarily. So yeah, it's like you fight the fights you can as much as you can, but there are times when you have to understand when you have to bow out.
What about like a situation which I have been in, where there's a male-dominated group, and then the language in some way targets the woman, and she's either unable or able to speak up. Is that then a time to?
Yeah, I think it's very important for men to speak up when other voices can't. And yeah, why are the men doing that? It's because they feel comfortable doing that. And their power is not being threatened in any way. Their status is actually, it kind of comes back to that sense of humor of making someone else feel bad and ridiculing them. So they're increasing their status by trying to bring someone else down. And all the men doing it, just call them out. Just be like, they're not cool. And I've started doing this thing, and it's interesting because I made a very conscious, sorry, I will get to you in a second, made a very conscious decision a few weeks and then started seeing these signs in the tram. And it's kind of like along the lines of if you see something, say something. And it was talking about racial attacks and like attacks like that. And the amount of times I've felt better when I've had support of someone, like knowing someone is there with me, even if it's a random interaction on a tram where I can help someone feel a little bit safer and like the whole world isn't against them, I'm going to do that. So yeah, like, also it's me, so I tend to like, if I see some guy yelling at a woman, I will like run in there in between the two and I'm like, I will take you on! Which apparently is not necessarily smart. I've been told. But yeah, it means that it's social pressure then, not individual. Yes, are you next?
I wanted to talk more about mental illness stuff because there does need to be cards for that, especially, in my opinion at least, the difference between sane-seeming mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, or like depression without psychosis, anxiety, because you do get in like psychosis with both of those. But basically, illnesses without depression, without compulsions that seem weird, things like that, and there needs to be more, just more recognition that they exist, and it's not just people in like respite care or in like psychiatric wards or whatever. That's a problem. That's all I'm trying to say.
Building on that point even further, I think as an industry as well, like a whole industry like this, because ultimately I look at everything in terms of dollars. That's the kind of person. There's a very valid business reason for taking everything that's being said today. About that mental illness one is something that I'm championing as a cause in my own company at the moment. It's not, diversity is not about touchy-feely, that we always give each other hugs, except that I do that too. But it's about making sure that everyone gets heard on a daily basis. Everyone has opinion, isn't dismissed. Legitimate criticism, absolutely. When the person is finished speaking, and I'm the worst for that because I'm so excited all the time. But diversity isn't just hiring. It's making with a practical diversity that happens every day, in every meeting, and it's something that everyone has to work on. And there's a valid business reasoning is this. If someone does not feel that they can speak up at that particular moment, and they might be a very quiet person, not just a loudmouth asshole like me, that they might have something which will make the game that you're making better. Something that makes me more angry than anything when I'm at work is when someone else stops someone from making the game better. And they do this by shutting it down, or by talking over, and because the creative people in my company aren't always the people with naturally the greater degree of extroversion.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to just quickly go talk about like happy teams are also more productive. And if you've got a good flow of information and like people working well together, then that's a great thing. And also diverse ideas mean companies do better. So there's like very solid evidence towards having these open, safe spaces of diverse people. Yeah.
I was just wondering that a lot of the time we try to find people who are good at making these conversations. Once we're aware that these are important conversations to have. Is it a problem if we end up disconnected from the people who most need to be like introduced to these concepts? So, so if I don't talk to many people who trying to not find a group that would be an attack. People who don't understand that saying that something is gay is a bad thing. They don't understand that.
Yeah.
But I don't interact with those people. And it's just because for our mental health, we try to avoid a lot of those things. It's just like, how do we spread these ideas mimetically if we end up in small groups?
Yeah. I think, yeah, like systemic change is really going to be difficult and it's going to be a very slow process, but we can make the world better. And each person that we reach then spreads it to their group, and slowly but surely it just filters out. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I actually went to an IGDA meeting one day, and there was this guy who was there for, I think, second time or something like that. Apparently we'd met before briefly. And he's, from what I gathered, he'd recently gone through a divorce. I think he'd lost custody of his kid. And he was talking about, and I said something about being a feminist. And he's like, oh yeah, but what about all these things? And brought up, custody courts and like a few of those like staples, which I really can't remember at the moment. I'm like, well, actually that's patriarchy because women are seen as caregivers. Why do we have to be seen as caregivers? Why have men put that on us? Yeah, I agree with you. Like my dad was the one who was at home making our school lunches and stuff like that. Like my mom apparently, going back to my mom because I love her stories, whenever I cried as a baby, would just kind of like put the doona over her head and then burrow down a bit. So, some ways. Yeah, I've got a whole slew of great stories about my mom. It's great. I love her. She's coming to visit in like 3 weeks and I'm going to stop panicking now. Thanks. Anyway, I had a point to make and I've totally forgotten it. I'm going to claim stress, which is not really a card for me to be playing. Yeah, sorry. We can talk about this. Something about something. Actually, we are, sorry. Huh? Yeah. We have to stop this discussion, actually. Oh, you want to go really quickly?
Very quickly. I just found something that I'm really working on is when I talk to people who are so different to myself, and like, I kind of call them dude bros, and I'll be like, I have to learn to separate antagonizing their behavior from antagonizing them as a person. And being able to still engage in constructive debate with them and saying that it's not you as a problem, it's not you as a person I have a problem with, it's this particular thing that you do. And that usually leads to a bit more constructive discussion.
Yep. I'm actually going to take a selfie with all you lovely panelists.
Yes.
I'm going to move over here, though. Sorry. Okay, getting everyone. Thank you. You have made this super lovely and wonderful. Thank you.